Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Chevy Chase at Home Speakers Forum. My name is John Idsty. I'm a member of the Chevy Chase at Home Board of Directors. We are excited to see such a strong turnout today and very anxious to introduce you to NPR's Allison Aubrey, who will speak to us about healthy aging. But first, a couple of words about this organization. As many of you know, Chevy Chase at Home engages our community in social and educational programming, both in person and virtually. We also provide volunteer services to older adults who need assistance, including rides, errands, tech support, household assistance, and just friendly visits. If you haven't already, we urge you to consider joining Chevy Chase at Home or your local village and become a member or volunteer. Uh, Now on to our program. Allison Aubrey is a longtime health correspondent for NPR News, uh, focused on the science of healthy aging and longevity. It's a special treat for me to welcome her since we were colleagues together at NPR. Our desks were just a few steps apart uh, for many years.
Yes.
In addition to hearing her on NPR, you can also catch Allison occasionally on CBS Sunday Morning. Allison has won many awards, including several James Beard Foundation Media Awards for her coverage of food and nutrition, and a New York Press Club Award for consumer reporting. She lives just up the road in Kensington, Maryland, with her husband, daughter, and two cats. She has one son in college and another one that's graduated and launched into the job market. Allison will answer your questions after her presentation. Please type them into the chat area on your screen, and then I'll ask them when Allison is ready. And Allison, we're so pleased to have you here today. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you, John, for that introduction. I'm so pleased to be here, and thank you all for the invitation. As John mentioned, we sat next to each other for a very long time and had lots of friendly chats coming and going throughout the years, and I really miss that daily touch point. I have been working at home ever since the pandemic started, which has its pluses and minuses. The minuses is just lose touch with that NPR community. The pluses, it's been a lot easier for me to parent and cook. So about a year and a half ago, I started a series called How to Thrive as You Age. And it kind of got kickstarted in the summer of 2023. I got a call from Marla Paul, a longtime communications person at Northwestern University. And she said, Allison, we're launching this amazing longevity study, and we're interested in getting the word out to folks. And your name came up as someone who might be willing to do sort of a launch story or be interested in covering this for NPR. And she said, if you say yes to this, it's sort of an exclusive, which in the world John and I inhabit, an exclusive is kind of a privilege or a compliment that somebody wants you to tell their story. And she said, you'll also have the chance to be a participant in this longevity study. And the goal of the study was to evaluate differences in chronological aging and biological aging. So everyone knows their chronological age, of course, that's the date stamped on your birth certificate. Your biological age is different because we all age at different rates. And the purpose of this big study at Northwestern University is to try to figure out, why do some people age faster than others? There's already a lot known about this. Sociodemographics plays a huge role. You guys may be familiar with You Are Your Zip Code data that shows, somebody in Princeton, New Jersey is likely to live like 18 years longer than someone who lives in the poorest tract of New Jersey. So a lot of this actually just overlaps with things that we already know and might be a little bit familiar. However, even within that, there's big differences in sort of how people age and the rate at which they age. And there's a lot of money and a lot of interest going into studying this. The folks that gave the Northwestern University longevity study its original grant are very interested in, why do people with chronic HIV age at a faster rate, which is an interesting question. I think a lot of times we think about like health and disease as this binary thing, like someone's either healthy or someone is sick, right? When we all know that what's the truer picture is that, it's this pendulum, and we're all somewhere, not a pendulum, but a spectrum, and we're all somewhere sort of on this spectrum of our rate of aging. And it's influenced by a lot of things that we can't control, such as genes, but it's also influenced by a lot of things that we can control. And over the last 15 years, I would say what has become increasingly clear is that your genes are not your destiny. Your environment and your behavior can turn genes on and off. And gene expression studies are really interesting and very complicated. But let me just take you to one that really caught my attention. So about a few years ago, I was looking around at a story about the risk of stroke among people over 50. And I found a study published by Jonathan Rosand, who's a neurologist at Massachusetts General Hospital. And he actually studies the overlap between genes and stroke and which genes might make somebody more susceptible to stroke. And so he, at that time in his career, 10 years ago, 5-10 years ago, was very, very interested in this genetic overlay, these genes. He did a study and he found that the risk of stroke is actually much, much more related to lifestyle habits than people ever knew. And so, yes, do genes play a role? Of course. But what the science has begun to show over time is that the risk of brain disease, including the risk of dementia, stroke, and late life depression, which sound like different things because one sounds like a brain disease and the other sounds like mental health, and they sound like completely different things, when in essence, they can have the same etiology, the same basis. And what he has found is that, and this has been corroborated by the Lancet and by many validation studies, Jonathan Rosand has found that about 40% of cases of dementia, stroke, and late life depression can be prevented with a series of lifestyle choices. So I think what's really interesting about this moment is that we are inundated with very generalized information about what it means to live well. You'll hear all the time, like, oh, you want to be healthy as you age? Diet's important. Yeah, duh. Sleep is important. Tell me something I don't know. Exercise is great. Yes, of course. Like, we are all well versed in the generic and the overall message. There is not a person out there who does not know that health is tied to these things. What's been missing in all of this is what I would call, as a science reporter, the dose response, right? So if alcohol isn't good for you because of a variety of mechanisms, well, do we all have to be teetotalers, right? And there's actually science to answer that question, right? So you can look through epidemiological studies and through mechanistic studies, and you can see, like, people who drink a lot have a very high risk of all kinds of conditions, including cancers. Teetotalers, not so much. So somewhere in that distance, is there a safe level? Is there a safe dose response? And well, there's obviously a dose response. The more you drink, the more at risk you are. But is there at some point that you could be, under that dose response where there isn't an increased risk? And to me, that is where the interesting science lies, because we all want the dose response. We all want to be doing enough of the good things and not too much of the bad things, but we don't want to give up the things that we love, right? So I've been reporting on these things for a very long time, and sometimes they're broken down, like nutrition science is one silo, the science of sleep is another silo, science of exercise is another silo. And really, there needs to be silo busting when we talk about, healthy lifestyle, because healthy lifestyle is really a basket of daily decisions and habits. And it's sort of fruitless to try to separate them. Like, what I mean by that is, like, if somebody has 8 healthy habits, it's hard to do a study that susses out the impact of one of these habits, right? And so it's hard to see the independent effect of one decision when so many decisions influence us. So I've become very interested in all this metadata that pulls together, like, okay, let's look at people who have most of the healthy habits that we know about. The UK Biobank has been an amazing resource for this. So the UK Biobank collected all kinds of blood information and lifestyle information and health metrics on people going back decades. And then most of these people who were enrolled in the study early on are now deceased, but they were able to see over a lifetime, collect data about everything these people did, everything they were diagnosed with, everything that they were treated for. They knew how healthy they were, they knew when they died. So you can do these retrospective studies with the UK Biobank data to go back and look at, okay, the people who would be considered to be the healthiest in the UK Biobank data, the people who were eating well, exercising, sleeping well, held healthy relationships, didn't drink too much alcohol, didn't smoke. They did all the right things and none of the bad things. What did their life look like compared to everyone else? And the results are kind of stunning. Like, I reported on a study in September of 2023 that blew me away. It actually found that in the UK Biobank, people who were most likely to comply with these eight healthy habits throughout their lifespan had a 50% reduction in episodes of depression or anxiety. And I mean, like, intuitively, I wasn't surprised because I've always like sort of felt this, but to see the data so beautifully show that it's this collection, this basket of habits that's so impactful, it's very exciting because it really shines a light on the big opportunity of prevention. And in my entire career, I've been interested in prevention studies, and everybody's always been saying, oh, it's really hard to study prevention. And, it's hard to get money for prevention. Pharmaceutical companies don't want to study prevention. There's no, money there to be made. So, prevention has been the sort of forgotten part of science and health research over the years, and mostly because of sort of how our society is structured, and there needs to be somebody making money at the end of the day, and no one's making money off of preventing disease. In fact, our entire system, as you know, it's not healthcare, it's disease care. We wait for people to get sick and then we treat them. And if we take away that model, think about how much you disrupt the status quo, right? You disrupt 1/5 of the economy. So prevention has been on a very slow road, but I'm very excited about the focus on prevention lately. And what I want to do over the next 10 minutes or so is walk you through something called the Brain Care Score. So I already mentioned his name. Dr. Jonathan Rosand is a neurologist at Massachusetts General Hospital. And he has treated many people who have survived strokes, many people who are suffering with dementia or Alzheimer's. And the question that he has heard most often in his career, either from the family of a loved one who has dementia or Alzheimer's, or from someone who's coming out of the ICU having had a stroke and has a good chance for getting better, but wants to know, what do I do now? The question is always, how do I prevent this again? Like, what can I do? And he heard that question so many times that he and a whole bunch of colleagues put together this Brain Care Score coalition, where they looked at all of the deterministic data at how our lifestyle habits are linked to brain diseases later in life, Alzheimer's, dementia, late life depression, and stroke. And he put together this little score, or this quiz. And what I love about this quiz is that it solves that problem of being flooded with generalized information. I mean, how many times do you open up like your favorite magazine or wellness blog, and it's like somebody saying, oh, sleep's really good for you, and you're going, yeah, I know that, and you're looking for the personalized plan. So through the Brain Care Score, you get your own personalized score, and you also by default get a plan on what you can work at in your own life to improve your score. So the amazing thing about the Brain Care Score is, after you take this little quiz that we're going to walk through in a minute, you will get a score. Every time you can raise the score by a point, you actually reduce your odds of developing dementia, Alzheimer's, late life depression, and stroke. How do they know this? They went to the UK Biobank and did validation studies. And they've published 6 or 7 validation studies in top tier journals. So let's just go through the score here. The first 4 things are things that everybody should know. Like, literally everybody on this call should know these things. Don't leave it up to your doctor. Like, you should know these things. So the first thing on the score is your resting blood pressure. I mean, this is the oldest story in science and health, right? Like everybody knows increased blood pressure increases the risk of stroke, heart attack, what have you. But like half, like literally a half of high blood pressure patients in this country or people with high blood pressure don't take medicines to treat it, which is really dumb because the high blood pressure medicines work and there's lots of different options and they are literally life-saving. So like number one, very basics, know your blood pressure, know your A1C. What is the A1C? The A1C is a composite score of your sort of average blood sugar over the last 3 months. And this is what's used to diagnose diabetes. If you, in this brain care score, if you have less than a 5.7, you get the most points. If you have between a 5.7 and a 6.4, you get the middle points. That means you're on the cusp of diabetes or even cross the line into diabetes. And then if you're greater than 6.4, you get no points because if you have uncontrolled high blood sugar, that of course is a very high risk factor for all kinds of things, including heart disease and all kinds of circulation problems and blindness. And you probably all already know that. So the third one is know your cholesterol. Why? Because there is oodles and oodles and oodles and oodles of data that your cholesterol levels are very important. And despite controversy about statin drugs, controlling your, cholesterol with them has been shown time and again to be a really important strategy if you can't do it with diet and exercise alone, which should obviously be the first step. The fourth thing is to know your body mass index, which is basically your weight that puts you into a category. These four numbers are deterministic of like almost all of the lifestyle diseases that most Americans die from, right? What do Americans die from? I mean, people die in old age, but what are the contributing factors? They mostly die from heart disease, diabetes, and these four factors will tell you where on the road you are to developing those things. So then the interesting part comes in this brain care score. So recommended dietary habits, right? So this is going to give you a kind of a global score for how well are you eating. And everybody knows that there's a lot of controversy about diet and what is a healthy diet and should you go keto and are carbs all bad and all these crazy conversations we get into trying to find the optimal or ideal diet. Well, if you look in this left-hand column here, this is just the sort of basics of a healthy diet. And this is all you really need to be focused on, which is just eating fruits and vegetables. I mean, literally, these are things that like kindergarten kids already know. I would say a huge problem in sort of our cultural health literacy is that I call it the von Goethe problem, that there's this big gap between the knowing and the doing, right? My entire career is reporting in this space that lives between what people know and what people actually do. Von Goethe said, it's not enough to know, you have to do. So why is it that we know all these things and don't do them? Well, one of the reasons is we make healthy diet seem like a really hard thing. Like we make it seem like it's something you have to give up all the things you love. No, a healthy diet is right here in this left-hand column. It's can you have 4 to 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, get it in a smoothie, get it any way you want it. Can you have, multiple servings of lean protein a day? Can you have 3 or more whole grains a day, which by default means not eating refined carbohydrates? Can you keep sodium kind of low? And can you keep sugars kind of low? I mean,
Allison,
that
can
is
I
so
interrupt for
easy.
just a
Yeah.
moment?
Yeah.
We need to tell people that they got a email with this brain score.
Yes. Or people not seeing coming along.
They're
Yeah.
not seeing there. You should have gotten an email from Jen, the director, with a link to this brain score um, chart. And hopefully
Yes.
you can access that as Allison is speaking.
Yes. As I'm speaking, you can actually take the quiz. I mean, you can just fill it in while you listen. So we're down into this lifestyle part. Then alcohol consumption, do you have to be a teetotaler if you want to be healthy? Probably not, right? You get the most points in this survey, if you have 0 to 1 drink a week, that gives you the most points. If you have a couple more, 2 to 3 drinks, you still get a point. Where does the problem start? After 4 drinks per week, right? That's where that is about the dose response, where you start to see an increased risk. And of course, this advice can be tailored if you've had breast cancer. Many breast cancer doctors will tell you abstinence is the best goal. So it needs to be personalized, but there you go. Alcohol consumption, if you stay in this sort of 2 to 3 drinks per week, most of the studies, and there's been lots and lots and lots of studies, you're not increasing your risks. Do you smoke? That's an obvious one. It's a yes, no. I mean, if you've ever smoked, you don't get any points. Or if you're a current smoker, you don't get any points. If you quit more than a year ago, you get some points. Aerobic activity, again, like really, really, really basic. You should be meeting the official guidelines of 150 minutes of moderate physical activity a week, which is basically 5 days a week for half an hour. You can also get that in small increments if you just build walking into your day. If you're getting the 150 minutes a week, you get some points. If you're not getting that, you get fewer points. Your sleep habits, this one's just a little tricky, but basically, you know, the guidelines, the more you sleep, and if you get about 7 hours of sleep a night, you're getting points there. The next 3 I'm going to mention are super important because 15 years ago, there wasn't a lot of science on the role of stress, social relationships, and meaning in life. And now it's very clear that your friendships, that having friendships and laughing in life are as impactful as good diet and exercise. So this is why they're added to the brain care score. So if you have few or no close connections other than your spouse or your child, that's something to work on, because friendships and laughter really is the best medicine. Social friendships and social contact points are, you've probably read some about the science of loneliness, and really this cannot be understated. I mean, what loneliness does to the immune system is kind of shocking and real, and has this real, you know, impact that can be measured in physiology. Same thing with meaning in life. If you're struggling to find purpose, you're going to get fewer points. If you generally are on a course in life that gives you meaning and purpose, meaning you can wake up today and you have some kind of agenda, or you have something you're aiming for, you have a goal, you have purpose, then that is doing all kinds of things to your physiology as well. I mean, it's not only tamping down stress, but it's increasing, you know, all of the good things. So has anybody, now let me go back so I can see all of you all. Have you, how many of you guys have been able to follow this along? Should I give you more chance to look at it? Oops. Okay, everybody's following along. Okay, so I think that as my youngest daughter heads off to high school next year, and I think about, sorry, is there somebody who wants to ask a question? No, okay, sorry, I just keep hearing something. Okay, so I am, as of this week, I'm on a 6-month book leave from NPR, and I, as my youngest child enters high school, I'm sort of thinking about this what's next stage in life. And what I'm realizing is that, you know, the things that were included in the brain care score, you know, taking care of yourselves, I just call this sort of like table stakes for the third turn. The name of my book is The Third Turn. It's about finding joy and purpose in the empty nest years or later half of life. And when I set out to write the book, I thought that I would, oh, sorry, there's a question. Did the survey and got my score. Where is the interpretation of the score? Okay, I'll answer that in just a second. So when I set out to write my book, I thought that the bigger focus of the book would be on these lifestyle habits. And that is 6 chapters, because I've done a lot of reporting about all of those things that we just went through in terms of the exercise and the best way to get it, and the best way, you know, the sort of dose responsive exercise and what it's doing in the body, and sleep and eating well. But where I have ended up spending more of my time and where my book is headed is helping people find what I call your third turn. And I think that this is like a really hard part of aging that nobody sets us up for. So in my own personal case, I have 3 children and a very go-go job. And the way that I describe my life is that I've been in a moon bounce for the last 2 decades, where I have been jumping between the controlled chaos of daily deadlines and parenting demands. And so, I'm at that point in my life where now that one of my oldest child is launched, my middle is in college, and my youngest is going off to high school, I'm finally at that point where I'm sort of looking around going, like, what's everybody else doing? Like, what do you do with yourself if you're thinking beyond the paycheck and beyond parenting? And this has become the focus of my book. So I am profiling like people who've made like amazing third turns in their life. And I'll just give you a few examples. I got to know someone who took up improv in her 60s, and she used to be like incredibly painfully shy. She was a magazine editor, and she was used to crossing the T's and dotting the I's, but somebody else's T's and I's. And she was used to sort of like hiding behind the people, and she was painfully shy to speak out. And somewhere around 60, she decided that, her canvassing and her political work to get Black female candidates elected was very important to her, and she didn't have the skill set to do that effectively. And someone sent her to an improv class, and she's now in her mid 60s. And the yes and approach to life, which is sort of the basics of improv, said that she told me that this transformed not only her life and her ability to go on stage and perform. She's now in an all Black troupe based here in DC. She performs, they go to competitions. But she said the approaches that she learned in improv about just speaking your mind and being willing to say what comes out of your mind without kind of like hiding behind and editing every word that she had to say, it led her to just a much more satisfying life. And that the first time that her husband, who they've been married 30 years, saw her on the stage at age 62, afterwards, he came up to her and said, "Who is that woman? I don't know who that woman is." And, when she told me her story, it just gave me chills. So she's a whole chapter in my book. And as well as when I'm learning about how improv can really help you kind of come out of your shell and find purpose at a time if you're looking for that. I'm also profiling a tax attorney who, she was a violin player growing up. I actually met her on a plane. And when she put her violin up in the overhead compartment, we struck up a conversation and we talked about music and a little bit. And I said, "Oh, it looks like you play violin." She said, "No, I don't play the violin." I said, "Oh, it looked like that's what the case was." And she said, "No, I play the fiddle." And I said, "Oh, I don't know that much. I thought they were the same instrument." And she said, "Oh, yeah, it's the same instrument, but it's a different attitude." And that just gave me chills when she told me that story, because it's such a metaphor for the third turn of life, that we all have these skills and these talents and things that we've learned by parenting in our careers, and we kind of like don't know what to do with them sometimes later in life. And in this woman's case, Leslie, she had played in an orchestra, like a youth orchestra, and she said she loved the violin, but if you struck a wrong note, it stood out and you were the bad person. It was like demerits if you couldn't do it perfectly. So the performance angle of being a musician really was very stress inducing to her. And so she gave it up for many decades. And when she came back to her music, what was completely shed away from her life was this idea of performance. And what she embraced was the idea of joy and improv. And so through using the idea of this is a fiddle, I get to use it and play it the way I want. Fiddling is all about improv. It gave her joy. It allowed her to repackage a skill she had that was, in her childhood and young adult life had given her a lot of stress, and it allowed her to use this instrument in a very different way. I could go on and on because I literally have dozens of these kinds of stories right now. I'm trying to pare down, but because it's already 1:32 and I yammered on about the brain care score, why don't we open it up to questions?
Why don't we start with the question that you saw just a moment ago about what people do with the survey. They've done the survey now. How do they get an interpretation of their score?
Yeah, so if you just downloaded the PDF, then you you don't get the interpretation. But if you do it through the MGH site, you will actually get an instant interpretation. It'll tell you after this call ends, because I don't want to spend 5 minutes fiddling right now, but if you, or you can just Google it now. If you just Google Massachusetts General Hospital, McCants Center Brain Care Score, if you take it through their portal, then you will actually get an email right away with your results. And it'll tell you, like, for instance, if you're not managing stress well, it'll tell you, oh, like, here's what you're supposed to be doing. You can do a mindfulness-based stress reduction course. So it not only gives you the numeral score, but then it gives you like advice for each category.
I've got another question.
Yeah.
How do you weigh these various indicators? Is socializing and finding meaning more important than exercise? And can I lay on the couch as long as I've got a lot of good friends that I'm talking on the phone? Um, is there a hierarchy of these that you really must do in order to be healthy?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the hierarchy is to control the four things at the top, right? And those are things that I'd be shocked if everybody listening today didn't know those four things. But I would also not be shocked to hear people saying, "Oh, I don't, my cholesterol is borderline. I'll hold off on the statin. I've heard statins are bad for you." No, you got to control your cholesterol. You got to control your blood pressure. I mean, it's just like this idea that I'm the biggest proponent of like food is medicine and exercise is medicine. My whole career has been about prevention. And this idea that, oh, medicines are bad for us and big pharma is bad, like whatever your ideologies are, like there is reams and reams and reams and reams of data that if you don't control your blood pressure and your blood sugar and your cholesterol, you're at high risk for all these diseases. And in many cases, medicines are required. And so I would say that like tracking those four things at the top of the brain care score are the most important things that you do. And then after that, the reason why the brain care score lists so many of these things is that, I'm just going to go back to the von Goethe problem that we have. Everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. You can walk into a kindergarten classroom and you can be like, hey, everybody, what do you think's healthier? Like, hamburgers and French fries or carrots and hummus? Like, they'll be like, lady, it's carrots and hummus. Like, you're not like 5-year-olds know like what a healthy diet is. So why as a society do we have, obesity rates like we see now, which is a huge driver of disease, right? We have that because we live in a hedonistic society. We live in a society that celebrates overeating and watch the Super Bowl. I mean, that is a reflection of the society we live in, right? What do you see advertised at the Super Bowl? Beer, Doritos, fancy hotels, drinking champagne, on the bed of a fancy hotel. Like that is what we've been led to believe is the good life, right? When in essence, that's not the good life. The good life is not hedonistic pleasure. My favorite social scientist of all times, Marty Seligman, said, the good life is the meaningful life, right? And so finding meaning and purpose is as much as a boost to longevity as all of these other things. So the question you're asking, John, of like, how do you prioritize? Because the brain care score is laid out this way, you get to prioritize, right? After you get your score and you want your score to be higher, you can look at each of those 7 categories and you can be like, you know what? I like to have a martini on Friday night. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not giving up alcohol. Well, fine, move on to something else. Look at the diet category, oh, I've already met all those categories in the diet category. Move on to something else. Are you really exercising 150 minutes a week? If you're not, find a new way to exercise. So the whole point of the brain care score is not to be like, oh, this is the most important thing. And if I do this, I don't have to do that. The whole idea is the higher your score, the better off you are. So pick the thing that you might be willing to work on yourself and focus on that thing as a starting place to raise your score.
How did you know I wanted to have a martini on Friday night?
Or Monday night, right?
Martini Monday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I want to remind you, you can, if you want to ask a question, we have so many people here, it's hard to just raise your hand. with the little emoji. But if you want to write a question in the chat, I'll ask it for you. Yeah, I wanted to ask you another. I mean, I was fascinated by the thing you said about genes can actually be turned on and off. So I could have a bad or an unhealthy kind of genetic makeup, and some
Hmm.
of my behaviors could turn it on or off.
Yes, yeah. So I think that there's a lot of research right now into epigenetics and gene expression. And yes, it is very clear that your lifestyle habits can turn genes on, on and off. As part of the longevity study that I'm in, I took a test called the Grimm Age Score. And it's based on what's known as DNA methylation, which is closely tied and aligned to how genes get turned on and off, depending on what's happening in your environment. And what's really fascinating, and it probably goes a long way to explaining why people age at different rates. And one of the most interesting things about the Grimm H score, if you're curious about this, you can actually take it. You can Google it very easily and find somebody who will calculate your Grimm H score. One of the things about the Grimm Age score, which is used a lot by researchers who are studying the differences between biological aging and chronological aging and the gap in there, is that they are increasingly finding that, two people can have the same genes. One ends up in a very diseased state from whatever genes from whatever disease they're predisposed to because of their genes, and the other one doesn't. And so yes, turning genes on and off. Genes are not your destiny. Genes are a starting place. They're a hand that you're dealt, but gene expression, meaning which genes turn on and off, has a lot to do with your lifestyle habits.
Let me, you're thinking about your third term.
Yep.
Um, Many of us on this call are already well into our, um, and I'm wondering, do you get to an age in your 70s or 80s where changing these behaviors really isn't going to make any difference, or are we never too old to get healthier?
I think the answer is you're never too old to get healthier. Obviously, it's harder to make an impact if you have decades and decades of lifestyle habits that aren't healthy. But let's just go to muscle building. So I've done a couple of stories and I'm very interested in muscle building. My mother, who's 82, took a very bad fall 3 years ago. And everybody thought, oh, this is it. Like, she's going to go downhill from here. And just the opposite happened. She leaned into weight training and physical therapy, and she's made this incredible recovery. But what we learned is that she and I both have, or she had certainly, what's known as sarcopenia, which is just age-related muscle decline. And there's been such a focus on weight in our society and BMI, which is a quick, easy metric to tell if you're in a healthy body weight category, but really has been overused and underappreciated in terms of what it can and can't tell you. So people can be a healthy weight, but can be under muscled, and that doesn't show up in your BMI, right? And so as you age, you're losing muscle at a much faster rate in order to maintain, because your muscle mass peaks at age 30. And then in order to stabilize and hold on to it, you have to move your muscles. You got to lift weights. You got to do resistance training. And so like my generation, Gen X women, it was all about like weight, right? Eating healthy to be thin. I mean, the obsession with thinness, really, we just totally missed the message on the importance in terms of longevity of keeping muscle strong, right? Like, think about what leads people into assisted living. If it's not dementia, what is it? It's the fact they can't take care of themselves. And what is that? What is I can't take my own bath and care for myself? That's frailty. What is frailty? Frailty is sarcopenia. It's people hear a lot about arthritis or osteoporosis and bones, but people don't focus enough on the importance of maintaining muscle. And if you lift weights, you can continue to build muscle no matter your age. Now, the older you are, the harder it is to add muscle mass. Women even harder. Women don't build muscle mass as easily as men, but you can continue to build muscle into your 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond. That has been documented. And you just do it by, resistance training. And there's so many different exercises these days to do resistance training. You also do it by focusing on protein. And many people over the age of 65 don't get enough protein into their daily diet. That's been shown in studies. So if you had to do two things today to reduce the likelihood that you're going to develop sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle loss, it is add more protein to your diet, unless you have a kidney condition, and move your muscles. So like I go to the Y now and I lift weights, and that's something that I didn't start doing until I was 53. So, building muscle and not focusing so much on weight, but focusing on muscle. There's this lovely technique to measure your muscle mass. It's called an electrical impedance scale. So you can join like Orange Theory or Anytime Fitness. A lot of these gyms have what's called electrical impedance scales. They also have them at weight loss centers. But you can hop on the scale and it not only tells you what you weigh, but it tells you your muscle mass. And then you can, go on a 6-month routine to lift weights. It takes about 3 days a week, about an hour is the dose response. And you go back a year later and you can measure your muscle mass again. And you can see like you can gain muscle over time. And you wouldn't notice that if you were just getting on a scale, because you might not have gained any weight at all. You might have lost a little bit of body fat and gained a little bit of muscle weight. So I have found the electrical impedance scales to be a very useful tool for validating my muscle mass growth.
Let me just follow up on the protein question, because I've read things that suggest I think there's a recommended 60 or 70 grams of protein per day.
Yeah.
But people say that if you're older, you need even more than that, because your body doesn't produce protein in the same way that it did when you were younger. You could produce protein out of different kinds of food then, and now it doesn't. So is that number valid, or do we really need more protein?
Yeah, no, that is a very, very, that's spot on. And I'm looking at I'm actually trying to find the transcript as we talk. I did a story in March of last year about what to know about protein and muscle mass. And in that story, I can put a link, or actually maybe afterwards. In that story, I explain that the recommended amount of protein is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, which is, I don't know why they do it in that way, but that's the way it's always calculated by experts. And yes, as people age, they can need more to maintain muscle mass, absolutely. And the only downside of eating protein is if you eat too much of it, it can do some funky things to kidney function. So as you increase protein, just keep in mind when you go for your annual physical, like when they do your CBC, when they do an annual physical and they do a CBC, if there's anything funky going on with your kidney, they'll tell you. You can ask about it. If you're changing your protein intake a lot, you could see something like that. Otherwise, there's not a downside to, consuming too much protein. I was hesitant to start adding more animal protein to my diet. So I started this thing where I just added tofu. Every time when I would normally be eating like veggies and rice, and I would just start adding like a couple more, ounces of tofu in there. And I started, having more nuts. I didn't, when I intentionally went out to increase my protein intake, it didn't necessarily mean, you need to start eating like a whole bunch more meat. I mean, depending on your preferences, some people like that or want that. Other people are trying to be more plant-based because there's a lot of health benefits of that. I was able to increase my protein intake using a lot of plant sources. And after this call, I'll send a few links, because for about a month, I took pictures of everything I was eating, and I did like a whole podcast and a whole like article about here's how I added more protein to my diet. But yeah, more is better unless you have funky kidney issues.
There are a couple of questions in the chat. One is thanks for the great presentation, and thank you for that. Uh,
Yes.
Again, what was the fourth variable? I think they're talking about in the brain scan. I think they're the top four.
Oh yeah, the brain care score, like the four metrics everybody should know. Yeah. So the ones at the top are your resting blood pressure, your hemoglobin A1C, which is basically your blood sugar. It's a 3-month average of your blood sugar, and that's how diabetes is, diagnosed. And oh, I'll add something to that. I wore a continuous glucose monitor last summer, and I'll tell you what, I learned a lot about what spikes blood sugar and what doesn't. And the third one was cholesterol, and the fourth one was your BMI, which if I were me, I would change it from BMI to like know your muscle mass and your weight, but generally like to be in a healthy body weight category. So let me tell you about hemoglobin A1C. So I wore a continuous glucose monitor for all of last summer. And I was very interested in, so when I was 51, my A1C was 5.1, which is super duper duper healthy. And then I started going through menopause, and my A1C in a matter of like 18 months rose to 5.6, which was on the doorstep to pre-diabetes. And I was shocked because like healthy eating is like my thing. I mean, John knows people at work would be like, if somebody made a cake or something, people would be like, oh, Allison's not going to eat that. She's going to just like have carrots and hummus. Like people like used to tease me about like what a healthy eater I was. So when my A1C rose, I was like shocked. And so I wore a continuous glucose monitor for the entire summer, and I learned 3 very, very important things that I will share with you. You do not, so when you're eating, your blood sugar has to go up and down, right? I mean, when you eat, your pancreas produces insulin. The insulin is what gets the insulin out of your bloodstream and into your muscles and into your brain, because that is the glucose that needs to be moved out of your bloodstream into your muscles and your brain. That is your basic fuel for your body, right? So glucose is a good thing. You just don't want it in your bloodstream. You want it in your muscles. When your muscles are working out, they're like slurping up glucose, right? So that's why if you take a walk or work out after a meal, your blood sugar like doesn't go crazy high and low, because where's that blood sugar going? Your muscles are going, oop, yep, need that blood sugar. My muscles are hungry for the blood sugar. That's why exercise can help ameliorate or prevent diabetes in the first place. And so that's like the basic gist on insulin and glucose, is that your pancreas will produce it every time you eat. A little bit's released. What you want in your blood sugar is you want like little peaks, highs and lows, little peaks. What you don't want is straight up and straight down. You don't want to eat a bunch of sugar, your blood sugar goes up, and then it like whoop, drops. Like you don't want that. So I for a whole summer wore a continuous glucose monitor last summer. And what I realized is I had to do 3 simple things to prevent the like ups and downs. The first one was I used to start every day with like a huge bowl of oatmeal, because I was like, oh, it's oats, and it's fiber. And yes, that's true. There is fiber, and oatmeal isn't, it is kind of healthy, but it's a lot of carbohydrate, right? And when you eat a carbohydrate on an empty stomach, blood sugar tends to go up a little. In mine, blood sugar goes up higher. So what I did is I front-ended everything I ate with fiber. So I literally have a thing of arugula or spinach, like troughs of it. And that's the very first thing I eat every day, is like a handful of arugula, a handful of spinach. And then when I do get around to eating breakfast a little bit later, instead of having like a big bowl of oatmeal, I have like a little tiny bit of oatmeal, but a lot of yogurt, right? A lot, and some berries, right? So I just re-engineered the portions to up the protein and the fiber and decrease the carbohydrates. And that led to like almost an immediate change and kind of like keeping my blood sugar stable. The other thing I did, and this was news to me, 2 more things, is that when you're stressed out, guess what happens? Your liver, which stores all of the glucose that you haven't used in the form of glycogen, your liver starts to like like release some of the glucose because it's going like, oh wow, the body's stressed out. That must mean, it's going back to the reptile, the way that we used to operate thousands of years ago on the savannah. Oh, there's a lion coming, like I need to run. So we have these old ways that our brains work, right? These responses to stress. And so if you're feeling stressed, your body's going, oh wow, that usually means you need more energy, right? So let's pump out some of this glycogen in the liver in the form of glucose, and then your blood sugar goes up, right? So there's this very symbiotic relationship between your management of stress and your blood sugar. And so I started to notice that when I was on deadline and I was like, oh my God, I'm finish by 4 o'clock, and I'm like feeling that cortisol or adrenaline, that stress response, that on those days, my blood sugar was like whoop, down and up, down and up. And then on the weekend, when I was more chillaxed, no matter what I was eating, I was just seeing less of the spikes. So stress, very highly correlated with blood sugar. So I changed like sort of like my breakfast, eating a lot more fiber and a lot more protein, reducing the amount of carbohydrates. I notice about this relationship between stress. And then the third thing that's really important is that the sequence of your macronutrients really matters if you're trying to control your blood sugar. The sequence, and what I mean by that is like, you go to a restaurant, they put a basket of bread on the table. That is like just taking sugar and like stream. It's just basically like drinking sugar if you eat white bread at the beginning of a meal. And what happens when you eat refined carbohydrate on an empty stomach, blood sugar goes way up. So again, if you go out for a meal and you do want bread, like baguette with olive oil or whatever, save it until after you've had like protein or the salad at least. But like there's a reason that the dessert comes at the end of the meal, right? Like sugar comes at the end of the meal because you've already front ended all this fiber and protein in your body, which slows everything down in terms of how quickly everything's breaking to glucose and getting into your bloodstream. So sequence of your meal, of your macronutrients, eat bread and sugar at the end of a meal. Do not eat refined carbohydrates on an empty stomach. For breakfast, add more protein, add more fiber. And then if your blood sugar is funky, pay attention to your stress.
So I shouldn't eat chocolate first thing in the morning.
No, absolutely not.
Couple other questions there about scores. Someone did their score.
Yeah.
It was 15 apparently, and she says, what does that mean? Is it low, adequate, or high, or what is the?
So the point of the score, that's the very first thing we do, right? We're all former students. We want to know what was our grade, right? And so it's a good question, but it's the wrong question. The right question is, what can I do to increase it? Because I kind of think of this as like radical acceptance, like instead of being like, oh wow, 15, have I failed, or is this good? Like just accept that's your score for today, and for you that's good. But your goal is to increase it. So look where you didn't get a high point. Was it the alcohol? Was it getting in all your vegetables? Was it 150 minutes of exercise? Was it seeing friends every day? Was it having a purpose in life? Like just go through there and do a gut check and be like, where is the place I can start? Like, where can I start tomorrow to make a little bit of a difference? So focus on 15 is your baseline. It's not an A, B, C, D, or F. It's not a grade. It's your baseline. And what your goal is to increase the baseline.
Let me ask you this. Someone else asks, what's the ideal score for a 90-year-old woman? And I guess the question is your score going to go down because you get older? Is that just natural, or can you get a high score and be
I guess the thing is as we age, no matter what we're doing, blood sugar is going up a little bit, cholesterol is going up a little bit, weight's going up a little bit. That's like natural. So on those 4 key metrics, like in your 80s and 90s, you might see things like increases that you can't control. But I'd give the same answer to someone who's 90 as the one to the previous question. Like, is there anything there that you would be motivated to improve? Because there might be something on that list where you sense like, oh, I could do a little bit better there. I could move 5 more minutes a day. Like, think of it as like, an opportunity for self-improvement, and think of it as kind of like an inventory, a self-knowledge kind of assessment. In fact, I probably shouldn't have used the word quiz because that makes it seem like there's going to be a grade. Just think of it as like good information for yourself and something to work on. I will say in the validated studies, they found that a 5-point difference. So when they retrospectively went back and pieced together people's brain care scores from all the UK Biobank data, what they found is that, you know, a 5-point differential could decrease the risk of stroke, dementia, and late life depression by about 30%. So just keep in mind, the higher your score, the better. If you see anything on that list in that quiz where you could do better and you're motivated to do better, that would be a good thing.
We have an achiever here who wants to know what's the highest score possible.
It is, the highest score is, I think, 30. The brain care score, let me just confirm that. 21. 21 is the maximum score. The scoring range is 0 to 21. Yeah.
Someone else asks, I have 2 to 3 servings of Greek non-fat plain yogurt a day. Is
Yes.
that good? Is that
yes.
okay? Well,
Yes. I think that yogurt is a great way to get in protein, and the Greek yogurt tends to have more. And I used to buy fat-free stuff, but I don't buy anything fat-free anymore, just because I like the texture of something that has fat in it. And you know, it's the whole fat-free boom was over decades ago. Like, your body does need fat, and dairy fat is, while it does have a little bit of saturated fat, unless you've been told by your doctor, oh, avoid dairy products for some other reason, or dairy fat, like I get like 2%. I just think it tastes better. But yes, yogurt has protein, and fat-free yogurt has protein. So yes, it's great snack.
let me ask you about that. You just said if your doctor tells you not to. Are doctors good nutritionists, actually? I mean, do they?
Yeah, it depends on who your doctor is. So generally speaking, most doctors themselves will tell you that they know very little about nutrition. In fact, they study very little nutrition as part of medical school. And really, I just go back to, if there's anything I've learned in 25 years of being a health reporter, is that our healthcare system is not, it is not aptly named. We do not have a healthcare system. We have a disease care system, and particularly the way our healthcare system is set up, right? With this employer-based insurance. And then, one of the reasons that there's no prevention built into these employer-based health systems is because by the time most of us develop the lifestyle-related diseases that can be expensive to treat, by the time someone with, somebody might be diagnosed with diabetes at 40, but by the time they need amputation or have diabetic ulcers or have blindness or, have all these other healthcare needs related to their diabetes, they're going to be over 65. And then whose problem are we over 65? Then we're Medicare's problem, right? And so it's a kick the can down the road where there's no prevention built into the system. Doctors are not rewarded for all, people will tell you all the time, oh, there's focus on prevention, focus on prevention. No, follow the money, follow the money. There is no focus on prevention. Medicine is very much focused on treating disease because that is the model that is lucrative. And so, doctors want to be good nutritionists, and there's plenty of nutrition professionals, but ask a doctor how many patients they have to see day in and day out. They don't have time to sit around and talk to people about nutrition. So yeah, there's a big gap in kind of sort of basic nutrition knowledge. Yeah.
A couple other things here. Someone asks, what if I exercise an hour a day rather than 30 minutes, 5 days a week? How about an hour, 2 or 3 days a week?
I think that's completely fine. I mean, I ask these same questions when I interview all the researchers about how you parse this out and break it down. And basically what's pretty clear is like our bodies were meant to move, and the more you do it, the better. But if that's your preference and you feel like you're getting your 150 minutes in, but you're not doing it every day, I think the science would say as long as you are getting those 150 minutes in, I think that it's also possible that you can incorporate some really simple resistance training techniques into your daily life when you're not kind of like a lot of times we're like, oh, today I'm going to exercise. I'm going to go to the gym, right? We tend to separate kind of like exercise from daily life. And if you're looking for little opportunities to incorporate more more exercise opportunity into daily life, like keep a little rubber band in your bed. And before you get out of bed in the morning, just, do this. That strengthens your arm muscles, or put it down on your feet and, scissor your feet, and that will strengthen your leg muscles. And just commit to 5 minutes of resistance training, every day. And then by the end of the week, you've built in a decent amount of resistance training, which is so critical to staving off sarcopenia.
Another question, physical challenges such as broken bones lead to major changes as we age. How do you
Yeah.
see post-trauma response?
Yeah. Like I think we need to do better as a society with things like chair yoga, or other things. That I just did a laughter yoga class because it exercises the diaphragm muscle, and it raises it decreases stress hormones, and it has all these physiological effects on the body. Even like, you think that laughter has to be in response to something funny, and usually that's when we laugh, but you can actually be just trained to start giggling. And when you do that, it is actually its own form of exercise. Like, it helps you it believe it or not, in just a few minutes of spontaneous laughter, you can move markers of stress, you can decrease stress hormones, you can increase heart rate variability. So I guess for people who have challenges moving around, think about like what's offered online where I don't have to leave my chair or my sofa because I can't for right now. And I would say, hospitals around, like suburban, I'm not sure if they're still doing it, but they used to offer, like during the pandemic, like a seated yoga class. So just different online like Zoom classes for seated exercises are a good idea, or just things like laughter yoga, because that's going to make you feel better and actually give your diaphragm muscle, which is a huge muscle in your body, a good workout.
We're going to have to wind up soon, but just a couple of quick ones. How do I get a continuous glucose monitor?
Oh, that is such a good question. So you can do it over the counter now. So there's two things you can do. You can go to your doctor and you can be like, I'm worried about my glucose. And then the doctor will probably say something like, oh, well, your A1C is okay. So, no, I'm not giving it to you. And then you can say, actually, I know of a number of, it's over the counter, these little digital health companies. You just Google them and be like, I would like to get a continuous glucose monitor. You pay out of pocket. And doctors are funny. They don't want like us to be too empowered, because then we're asking too many questions. And also, insurance won't pay for the CGM unless your A1C is above 5.7 or you're in the obese category. Now check your records. Like, a lot of people, like 1 in 3 Americans have prediabetes. So 1 in 3 Americans has an A1C that puts them on beyond the threshold of prediabetes, even if your doctor's never mentioned it to you and you say your health insurance might pay for it. So I went to my doctor and I was like, I want this. And she was like, no, 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 you're going to become the worried well. You don't, all you need to do is, she was just pushing back. And I was like, look, information is knowledge. Like, to me, like, I want to be in control here. Like, we need to wrestle control from our healthcare providers and stand up for our own health. And she was like, look, I don't want you texting me on the portal every time, you see a rise and a dip that you don't like. And I'm like, I'm not. I'm just going to watch it for 3 months and see what happens. And I would say I learned so much from wearing that CGM. And I think it's a crying shame that they're not like just allowing people who are concerned about this, given it's such an important indicator of health, anybody to do this. If you do it out of pocket, you're going to pay a couple of $100, but and so just consider if that's in your budget.
A last quick question. Is the use of protein powder safe?
Yes, unless they're contaminated. So very occasionally in a blue moon, you'll hear about like protein powder contamination. So, um, I point that out only because look, anything you eat can be contaminated. I only point that out because I did a whole podcast um, about getting more protein. And I said, like, protein powders are great. They're easy, throw them into a smoothie. And somebody wrote in to chastise me that they'd been poisoned by bad protein powder. So, John knows as journalists, we always hear from the people who have complaints about our stories. But yes, there's lots of protein powders out there. Collagen protein powders are like really popular right now, but collagen is not what we're not all going to have skin that looks like we're 30 anymore. So I wouldn't say focus on the collagen, just focus on one that includes all the amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein. And then I would say don't have the same protein powder every day, because then if there is some kind of contamination with some kind of heavy metal or something, you haven't been eating the same one every day. So your exposure would be much, 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 much less. And I don't mean to overblow the risk of contamination, but there oddly have been like a few instances of protein powder contamination. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Allison, for just a fascinating presentation. And I'm
Oh,
sure,
yeah. Happy to do it. And I would love to come back. Oh, also, if anybody knows of somebody in their 70s, 80s, or 90s who had like made an interesting third turn and, at some point in life and are still at it, I would love to hear. I would love to hear about it for my book.
well, thank you again. I mean, really, this has just been such a pleasure to have you on and so much great information. Thank you so much. And
Yeah, you're so welcome.
thanks to all of you for joining Chevy Chase at Home today for our speaker series and being such a good audience. Great questions. I invite you to explore other programming listed on our website, which we have put into the chat. You should find the website there and consider joining your local village as a member or volunteer. Thanks again, Allison. So good to
Thank
see
you. Everybody have a great day.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.